you ever felt as if you were part of something really big? Something that goes way beyond yourself and contributes to society in such a specific and accurate way that you just knew you had to investigate about it? Well, I have. And if by any chance you don't know what I'm talking about, it's nothing less than hip hop. From its unorthodox beginnings to the cultural phenomenon that it's now, hip hop is a topic that not only deserves praise, but a complete journey throughout its history and contributions. Even more now that in the 21st century, despite everything that it has done for society, it's still heavily discriminated by a vast majority of people. So please, come with me, Luis Felipe Breton, as I take you through my investigation process of my senior project, Hip Hop Breaking Down Paradigms. So, as with any other investigation process, there has to be a formal introduction and contextualization. As some of you might not know, hip-hop was actually born in the 20th century and made one of the biggest political intricacies in history. This was the Cold War. So at that time, the US was trying to keep the atomic threats from the Soviet Union from being anything else. Therefore, their attention shifted completely from one place to another, marginalizing even more the already discriminated populations of the Afro-American, Irish, Italian, and Puerto Rican that had immigrated to the US or that were already living there. Nonetheless, the actual development of hip-hop started specifically with the Afro-American communities of the Bronx and Harlem. In these marginalized places, hip-hop surged as a protest or a way of manifesting what they were uncomfortable with and how they thought that the whole handling of the government in regards to the political intricacy was not being dealt well. Therefore, these communities were the ones that actually set foot and the foundation for what hip-hop will ultimately become. And they were the ones that developed the three main branches of hip-hop that recently actually became four. These are rapping, MCing, DJing, and graffiti. In a short period of time, hip-hop evolved in a trend and in a way that was unprecedented and unlike anything ever seen before. In fact, it transitioned from being an American-only genre to being a worldwide phenomenon. In fact, the first countries that were affected were Tanzania and Chile, and in these, they're actually starting implementing like native stuff into the already developed hip-hop. For example, in Tanzania, the natives were implementing Swahili into rapping. Now, a question that you may be asking yourselves is why? Why did he choose this topic? Why hip-hop? Why is it so important? Well, the fact that I wanted to research hip-hop and the reasons why I did want to do it are thousands. Nonetheless, I've synthesized them into four main ones. The first is that, as I said, hip-hop is in modern day one of the fastest spreading cultures ever. It was unprecedented and it still is how fast it's spreading and affecting all areas of social culture, not only socially but also economically and politically. Second reason, the discrimination towards its exhibitors in modern day, it's unlike anything ever seen before. Despite all the cultural attributions that hip-hop has done, many of its exhibitors are still discriminated despite the fact that they actually help a society grow culturally and in other areas. This reason, the third one, actually correlates to the previous one, since the people that actually criticize hip-hop, that are both from internal and external sources, have a vast disinformation on what hip-hop actually represents and how it actually came to be. So therefore, this investigation tries to break down that paradigm of why hip-hop it's actually good culture instead of the one that it's viewed by people on how it supposedly breeds violence. And the fourth and final reason is that it promotes cultural appropriation. And this means that hip-hop, it's a way or an actual like generation that is passed on from time to time and that actually helps take in cultural aspects from a different time or community. Objectives. As with any investigation, there are two types, general and specific. So pretty much to sum up the general, it was based around developing a year-long investigation that will later on be communicated in regards to its results to two specific communities which would be analyzed and treated. Into the specifics, first it was the same, develop a thorough investigation, but in this regard of hip-hop and later on to communicate its results to a specific population, which are the ones of GI School and Gimnasia Los Nogales of the city of Armenia. Consult the modern hip-hop knowledge of both students and faculty staff from Gimnasios Nogales in order to obtain theoretical information about how primary sources view the entire issue of hip-hop discrimination in the 21st century. Develop the actual exposition of the investigation to both Gimnasio Inglés and Gimnasios Nogales, just that in the case of Gimnasios Nogales, it had to be a more synthesized presentation since there was not a lot of time. 4. Calculate through findings and conclusions the impact of hip-hop in certain parts of Romania and specifically in certain dance groups, and state whether the theoretical information and the practical precede a foreseeable positive or negative future for hip-hop. Hypothesis. So this was done in an if and then statement. The if one pretty much states that if a research on hip-hop, a global transcendence topic that encapsulates various ethnic groups and racial groups in order to be presented later on to an unknowing audience, then the knowledge of this audience and specifically these two populations will increase, and not only that, but they as much as I will be able to defend how hip-hop is actually a social tool. Explanation of the theoretical framework. Okay, so this part of the investigation is the one that contains the most amount of information, both theoretical and practical. So please stick with me. I've summed it up into the two most important theories that I've investigated. The first one is called the theory of capital culture, and pretty much it was done by a very famous sociologist known as Pierre Bourdieu, and he pretty much states that juvenile culture and juvenile generations are vital for the actual development and optimal use of a culture. Not necessarily hip-hop, but it counts, since the point that he makes is that juvenile generations possess a mental skill that none others do, and this is called juvenile perseverance, from which they can use and pretty much overpass or go over any kind of social barrier and therefore be able to successfully encourage someone to learn a new culture. The second one is juvenile cultures in tone of women, and this one is kind of similar to the previous one, since the investigator actually wanted to explain the entire historical and cultural development of hip-hop throughout history. Nonetheless, she does it through a female tone. What this means is that she explains how women have also been a pivotal role in the actual development of hip-hop and how they have contributed just as much as men have. And why did she choose this topic overall? Well, because like me, she identified that hip-hop, despite its contributions, is heavily discriminated nowadays. And as I said before, not only because of external sources, but also because internal. And these are pretty much the male exhibitors. Some male exhibitors of hip-hop actually discriminate women and treat them badly only because of their gender. And this is a problem that has come from thousands of years before this. Nonetheless, the investigator actually sets some steps for women to actually get into the investigation and get into hip-hop itself. And these are to learn breakdance and rapping first. Why? Well, because these two branches are the ones that have been the most male-dominant throughout history. So if they are able to break their social barrier and prove to men that they are able to pretty much gain their entire same level or even surpass it, then they might be able to come into hip-hop. These are two quotes that I picked from these two theories, so you're welcome to pause the video and take a look at them. Diagnostic. So in this part, I'm going to explain pretty much what I did in 3 practical sessions with the junior dance group of Gimnasios Nogales. And in a posterior manner, I'm going to explain how I expanded those practical appliances with another 3 sessions. So first of all, the first session was pretty much just doing some actual research based on a poll that I delivered to the junior group of Gimnasios Nogales to learn about their prior knowledge of hip hop and their overall knowledge about the topic. The first question asked, briefly describe the historical or cultural knowledge you possess about hip hop. So this picture, apart from what the slide says, shows a clear tendency towards how exhibitors of hip hop are not only interested in the practical appliances of it, but also the theoretical. since as you can see, 90% answered that they actually know where hip-hop started, which is really positive since it denotes that hip-hop is actually changing. It's pretty much its exhibitors to not only be interested in certain parts of it, but actually understand the entire culture and actually take all of it in. Nonetheless, the 10% that answered did not know represents still that unknownness and that ambiguity towards the topic that still remains in society. Question number 6. Do you believe the branch of hip hop, known as rap, is a violent genre? So this specific question was extremely important because it held a lot of connection towards the entire motive and objective of investigation, which is to break down the paradigm of discriminated hip hop. And as you can see, the graphic said that 90% of the people, just like as in the previous question, think that rap is not a violent genre. From this answer, we can infer that it's due to the fact that they believe that rap, just like as with any other music genre, is just another way to communicate something that you want to express. It's another way to say something that you cannot normally say with just normal words. Yes, there is the point that rap is at times more direct and a little more obscene when it comes to its actual lyrical content and stuff like that. And that's one of the main points of criticism. Nonetheless, many people do not know that rap was actually born at the same time as reggaeton. And in fact, it adopted various of the cultural aspects of reggaeton. One of these being the obscene and sexual use in their lyrically. Therefore, people are judging hip-hop based on something that wasn't its fault and that actually is musical characteristics of another genre. Question number 14. Do you believe the genre of hip-hop is criticized or accepted in modern society? Okay, so just like as the previous question, this was extremely important because it showed how primary sources, such as dancers themselves, view the overall state of hip-hop in modern society. And as you can see, 30% answered that it is accepted but with prejudice, another 30% that it's accepted normally, and that another 30%, sorry, the value is not correct there, it says that it's criticized. So pretty much we can apply a tendency that at least 66% of the entire group said that despite hip-hop being culturally more accepted nowadays, it's still heavily criticized. And this is the main problem because cultural assimilation, it's a task, it's a process that cannot be fully completed if there's still discrimination in it. Now on to the field diary, which are the 3 main sessions that I explained before. Session number 1. Okay, so the main objective of this one was to pretty much observe and analyze a practice session from the dance group Gian Step, or Gimnasia Los Nogales Step. So pretty much what I wanted to do in this session was to analyze how the juvenile generations are able to take in a foreign culture, but not only in behavioral or theoretical aspects, also in physical. And apart from actually the dance moves and the routines, something that I found really interesting is that the kids, or certain kids, were actually adopting certain clothes and outfits that people in New York and United States overall use when exhibiting hip-hop. So from there we can see that the actual assimilation of a culture comes also in aspects that people deem less likely. Session number 2. So in this one I wanted to validate the theoretical claims presented by the investigator of hip-hop in Tone of Women that I explained before. So pretty much what I wanted to do here was to carry out several different interviews only with the female participants of the group. With these, I will be able to validate, as I just said, what the investigator actually claimed in his theories. And from the main findings that I can communicate is that girls, at least in the group, do not witness that type of behavior from men. They actually believe that when exhibiting hip-hop, they are able to set their own ground and present their own kind of innovations towards the entire culture itself. Therefore, we can infer that in the entire world or wherever hip-hop is being exhibited, the only way for the social discrimination seen within it in regards to gender to be broken, there has to be a stand-up or a female surgeons from the bottom, and for them to show how they are equally skilled as men. Session number 3. So this was the most demanding and theoretical session, since pretty much I had to develop a poster as an investigator prior to the actual session, which included 5 phrases that I took and quoted from the theory of cultural capital that I explained before. In this one, just like in the previous session, I wanted to validate Bourdieu's remarks on the young generation's role in culture. And from what I could find is that young generations or juvenile generations actually do play a pivotal role when developing a culture, in this case hip hop, because they are the main recipients of it. From a culture that was developed in a different time, such as in the 1960s, for it to be actually brought into such a modernized and technological world as now, the juveniles are the only ones that count with the actual mental and physical skills to demonstrate that it can be not only assimilated but encouraged to an entire society. Results. These are of 2 manners, theoretical and practical. So the first one's the theoretical is that, as I just said, hip hop can not only be understood as a social tool, but also pretty much as this artistic development thing that you can use to solve violent situations. Many of the other investigations that you will see on my actual document that I wrote is that hip hop throughout various cities in Colombia has been used as this tool that people can use in order to re-immerse into the society that once rejected them. The practical impacts pretty much can be synthesized into that, as I just said, hip hop is mainly incorporated by younger generations. The physical demonstrations such as presentations or dances or routines are the main exhibiting points that actually encourage the unknowing audience, the unknowing populations to actually get into this culture and try to implement it themselves into their personal lives. And the artistic variety, the artistic plurality that hip-hop brings into the actual world is what really appeals to any type of community or to any type of individual. The fact that they have various choices from which to pick and from various areas of development from which to grow, it's what really pretty much catch their attention and what really brings them into the entire movement of hip-hop. Reflection. So, as with any other investigation, there are positive and negative aspects. In regards to the positive, this can be synthesized into the fact that I, as an investigator, possess a lot of innate skills that prove invaluable at the moment of actually carrying out the investigation and its practical appliances. Things like time management and personal dedication are some of the skills I already have that pretty much help me throughout the entire process and that make things, for example, like the actual planning of the practical sessions during times like the COVID-19 were really, really helpful. On the other hand, the aspects to improve can be synthesized into 5. One is that I did not know anything theoretical about hip-hop prior to the actual investigation. Despite that hip-hop is my favorite genre of all time, I did not know any theoretical value of it. Second, I'm not an investigator that is very optimal at applying social relationships people, so this really limited my interaction with both the senior and junior groups of GN STEP. 3. Not taking advantage of opportunities. These presented themselves in various ways throughout the entire year and throughout the entire process of investigation. Nonetheless, due to personal issues and external things, I was not able to take advantage of. 4. As I mentioned before, the global pandemic of COVID-19 made it really difficult to actually plan and carry out my practical part of the investigation. And 5th was just some planning confusion regarding the actual visiting hours towards the community of GN STEP. And to end, my conclusion. So to summarize briefly these 2 slides is that the hypothesis and the objectives were all met. Nonetheless, if I can make you stick with something, if I can make something stick in your mind after seeing this presentation, is that before you get into any culture, any hobby, any whatever, please make sure to research about it, to learn where it came from, to learn how it grew, what has been its development, how is it seen nowadays, because this information trust me, will prove invaluable later on. Not only will it make you more knowledgeable than other people regards of what you're practicing, but it will prove that you're not a person that not only gets interested in like the practical things of a practice or a culture, but that it's also interested in knowing how that culture came to be. To conclude, my annexes, my Google Sites website that you are welcome to visit if you want, and my bibliography. My name is Luis Felipe Breton, and this was my senior project presentation, Hip Hop Breaking Down Paradigms. Thank you very much.